Hey guys, it's Jessica from Peace Love Books, and today I'm here with my top 21 historical romances of 2021. I had a list of 23 that I was like, I don't know how to make a top 10 or even a top 12 out of these, and so everyone on Instagram told me just include all of them, and a bunch of you recommended your top 21 of 2021, and I was like, that's perfect. I don't know why I didn't think of that, so I did cross out 2, and I have 21 historical romances that are my favorite that I read this year. I've read over 400 books. I've read so many historical romances, so many amazing historical romances. I own most of them too, which is really impressive. So I will go ahead and get to them. Before I start though, let me know what you think are my favorite historical romances of the year, because I know I talk about a lot of these all the time, and some of them I forgot I read this year, because some I read back in January or February, and I was like, I could have sworn I read that years ago and I loved it, but I read it this year. So I'm gonna go ahead and get to my books. The first one I have is The Rake by Scarlett Peckham. This is one that I was like, how have I only been reading this for a year? I thought I read this years ago, but this one was just one of my favorites. I know it's one that's pretty polarizing. A lot of people really don't like it. I personally loved it. Our heroine is a Rake, and well, look at this cover. It's stunning. She has a reputation in town, and because she's a woman, people absolutely detest her. They talk really poorly about her, especially even to her face. And so she's actually writing a tell-all book about her experience, and she falls for a architect who is, I think he's working locally, and they meet, and he's a single father and he has 2 children, and his story is just so sad. But I really love this book and everything that it talked about, especially having a female Rake character and comparing her current situation and how society treats her to the person that she did have a relationship with out of wedlock, and how he gets to go up in society and she is completely trashed and torn down by society for doing the same exact thing. This one was amazing. I need to stop talking about it, but definitely one of my favorites. There are quite a few picks on here from the Historical Hellions, which is my book club I run with my friend Samantha from Books with Samantha. I think there's at least 3, 4 on here that we read for the book club. So I have a lot of old school historicals that I loved, and so Night Song is one of them. I adored this book. It's just so romantic, and I just love Beverly Jenkins, especially her older books, and just how all-consuming their romance is. Our heroine's a school teacher. A family member got lynched in the beginning, and so she really does not trust soldiers, and our hero is a soldier, and he comes into town and he is immediately like, oh, I really like her, but he has never wanted to get married, and this story goes on from there. I really love this book. There is even a little bit of like intrigue and someone's trying to kill someone, which I feel like happens at the end of every Beverly Jenkins book, but I just loved how smitten the characters were with one another, and I absolutely love this one too. Then we have The Sum of All Kisses, and this one's by Julia Quinn. I think this is book 3 in the series. So the first book has to do with our heroine whose brother has to leave because he was in a duel, and then the second one is the brother story who was in the duel, and then the third one is the other guy in the duel who actually got injured, so he has a limp, and I absolutely adore this one. It revolves around a wedding. The heroine is like put in charge of him at the wedding, and then they have to go with the wedding party somewhere, so they're in the carriage together, and all of her sisters are there, and it's so funny. I really love just how sweet this romance was, and how the hero feels like he's not enough for the heroine because he can't like carry her somewhere because he does have a limp because of this injury he sustained from the duel. And it just reminds me how stupid men are, and how duels were the most ridiculous thing ever, and how they happened so much during that time period, and how it comes up a lot in books, and you're supposed to like shoot wide so you don't actually hurt each other, but you're still showing up so you can be men and like show each other that you're manly enough. And they always end up hurting each other, and I really enjoyed how the story went though, so I love this one. Another one I thought I read forever ago is The Duchess Wore It by Courtney Milan, and I still haven't continued on in the series. I have books 2 and 3, and I just never continued on, even though I absolutely adored this one. Our heroine is trying not to get attention from people, and I remember she's hiding behind a curtain when she meets the hero, and the hero is immediately intrigued by her, but she does not want attention from like anybody because she has severe social anxiety, and that comes up and why she has social anxiety. I loved how he helped her and just was so patient with her anxiety, and she does not want attention, but she's supposed to get married to someone, and there's also these workers in factories are wanting to go on strike, and someone's like supporting that and like putting fire behind them to do that, and people think that it's her, and she's like, I'm not doing that. He is definitely interested in her and wants to find out her secrets, and they spend time together, and it's just amazing. He falls first, and I absolutely love this book. Another old school historical hellions pick is Love Only Once by Joanna Lindsey. I was so shocked how much I love this one. We have overprotective family members in here because our heroine has definitely overprotective family that she ends up running into in here, and we have the beginning where our heroine borrows a carriage from someone who happens to be the mistress of our hero, who is definitely a rake. He reminds me of Anthony from The Viscount Who Loved Me, and he ends up wanting to put his mistress in her place because she's being annoying to him. So he arranges a kidnapping and kidnaps our heroine instead because she borrowed her carriage, and that's how the story goes. She gets ruined, and it was just so fun, and I love Joanna Lindsay's books. Some of them are hit or miss, but I just really enjoy this one and how their romance progressed, and we do have, I believe, part of it's on a ship too, if I'm not mistaken, and it's been a while since I read this one, but I really did love this one. I know you guys are waiting for me to talk about this one because I'm literally obsessed and I have not shut up about it, and that is If the Duke Demands by Anna Harrington. Again, another one where I feel like I've talked about this so often that I'm like, how have I only read it this year? So this one, our heroine's in love with one of the boys who grew up next door, who is the son of a duke, and the father dies, so the eldest son takes on the title and he needs a duchess, and our heroine is finally like, I'm going to seduce the guy. Like, she seduces the wrong brother. They realize it early on enough, but not early enough, and then they decide to strike a bargain where they're going to help each other. He's going to help her get his brother, she's going to help him get a duchess, and they fall for one another instead. I really need to reread this because that's literally the only thing I remember about this book, but I absolutely loved it, and them falling for each other even though they're supposed to be helping each other find other people. And I do remember his feeling guilty because he was a rake before and was not there for his father when he died, so now he's like, I need to find a duchess, and he's so serious about it, but she is not good enough because she's low class, but I loved it. I literally finish every time talking about a book with I loved it. But the next one is another, I feel like, booktube darling, and that is Never Seduce a Scot. I watched Tori's video already, and she did her top historicals literally today, the day I'm filming, even though this is going to go up next week. But check out Tori's video, I will link it down below. But this one, our heroine is actually deaf, and she has not let people know that she's deaf though. She acts like she is like simple-minded. I forget what they called it, but they just think that she has not fully recovered from a injury she had. I think she like fell into a river or something. So she lets people think that even though she's very intelligent, she's just deaf. And so these two families are feuding, and it's either like the king or someone says like, enough is enough, you guys are gonna stop fighting, marry your children together. And so the leader of the clan has to marry her, and he is so protective of her, and people are kind of rude to her when she comes first though because she is from the rival clan. But his sister, I really loved her character too, and how she got to know her and how they slowly reveal like, oh my god, she's like actually really smart and she's just deaf and we need to learn to communicate with her. It was just amazing. I love this one. If you haven't read anything on this list, you have to read this one. So good, and I feel like everybody agrees that this one is just amazing. Okay, so this is the other one that's like booktube's darling, and I feel like I've not met a single person who hasn't liked this book, and it is My Darling Duke by Stacey Reed. Another one, we have a disabled character. So our hero actually was in a really bad accident. I believe it was a fire, and so he has a lot of trouble walking on his own, and he is scarred, and so he does often have to rely on a wheelchair, and so he's a recluse. He has not been seen in society. Our heroine is determined to get good matches for her sisters, and so she decides to put an announcement that she is engaged to the long-lost Duke, and then gets more like better attention for her sisters, and like his solicitors come and show up, and they're like, hey, here's his money, and she's like, oh, I'm okay. She's like, doesn't know that that's gonna happen, but they believe that she's his betrothed, and so he ends up coming back into society to see who this is, and he agrees to keep up her ruse if she comes to his estate with him. I believe it was in Scotland, to spend some time with him. I love this one. This is another one I definitely want to reread. I do not recommend the audiobook though. I really did not like the narrator, so I ended up physically reading book 2. Book 3 just came out. I just love this book so much. I highly recommend it. Then I have A Week to Be Wicked by Tessa Dare. This one I had to include because it was just so funny. This is the only one in the stack of books that I have that I literally like laughed out loud reading, and our heroine is really into fossils, and so she wants to go to this convention in Scotland, part of this society of men, and she only uses her initials, I believe, so they don't know she's a woman. And the hero wants to marry her sister, and she says no, and I forget what happens, but like she says, no, marry me instead, and then take me to Scotland. And he is terrified of coaches because his parents died in a coach riding accident, and so they have to find out how to get to Scotland without a coach, and they end up having to like stay at an inn together, pretend to be brother and sister, and then they get robbed by highwaymen, and there's just like so many things that happen in here. I literally laughed out loud. I rarely laugh out loud in books. I was laughing out loud, and it was just so funny. The audiobook was so good. My favorite in the series, this is a Spindle Cove series, I believe, and it's very hit or miss for me, but this one, was just so good. If you want a funny historical romance, you have to read this one. Then a new to me author is Olivia and the Masked Duke, which I have book 2 and I still have not read it yet, so I really need to, but this one is a romance about an age gap. So our heroine Olivia was saved when she was young by our hero. He's actually a widower, and he had a very toxic relationship with his wife, and he does not trust women like at all. And so Olivia is finally of age, and she's like, I'm old enough, I want you, this is gonna happen. And so they end up having a romance, but she ends up being part of a spy group like Charlie's Angels and infiltrating these parties and like having disguises. And he is so overprotective though, and he is like, you're not gonna lie to me, I've already had a relationship that was very toxic, that I could not trust my wife. And so they have a lot to deal with. And I just loved the dynamics of their romance. I loved how she's a spy. This one was just so fun, and I'm so happy we read it for the Historical Romance Readathon, I believe in February, like early this year, and I just was obsessed, and I'm so happy I discovered this author. Another recent one that I have not stopped talking about that was for Historical Hellions is Ravished by Amanda Quick. This one is just, I read my second Amanda Quick and I did not like it. Like, I gave it 2.5 stars, but this one still is one of my favorites. In this one, our heroine is an archaeologist. She loves looking for fossils. It's a common thing in historical romances, and so she loves these caves, and she's very protective of these caves because she wants to find these fossils. She realizes that men are smuggling stolen goods in these caves. She goes to the Viscount and says, hey, someone's using my caves, you need to stop it. And so he just says, okay, sure, like, I'll help you. And he's like, but stay out of it, I don't want you to get in trouble. She doesn't stay out of it. She notices that the smugglers are back, so she alerts like the Viscount, and she goes herself, and they end up getting into a precarious situation, and they end up getting stuck because of the tide, and so she's ruined. So they have a marriage of convenience, and the story goes on from there. He has a very bad reputation though, because he had a betrothal go wrong, and everybody thinks he's a monster, and she will go off on anybody who doesn't believe him to be a good person, and she's so protective of him. And I loved that dynamic between them. I love the marriage of convenience. I love the whole mystery of who's smuggling goods into the caves, and it was just like perfection. So good pacing with the action and adventure and the romance. I loved everything about this book. Okay, so then we got into my I need to read all these taboo romances. So the first one that sparked this, that you guys told me to read another one that's on this list, is My American Duchess. This one is a romance about a duke who needs a wife, and his brother who's a second son, so he needs a wealthy wife, and our American heiress who's been engaged 3 times, and she's like, I cannot break off another engagement, like this last one's gonna be the final one. And the duke meets her, and he's like, she is perfection, she is mine, and realizes that earlier that night his brother had proposed to her. And so she's like, I'm not breaking off this engagement, but she spends more time with the family, starts falling for the brother, and the brother is just like, you're mine. And it was so good. I liked how she kept on trying to convince herself that she loved the younger brother. The younger brother was definitely a second son in the aspect that he didn't care about anything, used all of his money, really needed to marry someone wealthy. But there's a dog in here too that's so adorable, and she's learning about English society, so I really appreciated learning it along with her. Like, if you're new to historicals, this is really a good place to start, because she's like, well, but you call him your grace if he's a duke, and like, who do you call my lord, and like all that stuff, and it's just like really good. I just love the taboo aspect, and I just couldn't get enough. Okay, so then started my Lorraine Heath obsession. There might be a few on this list, maybe 4. And so someone had recommended like, oh, just do like one from each author, and I was like, literally it's all different authors except for Lorraine Heath, and there's no way I'm keeping her books off this list. And so the first one is The Duke and the Lady in Red, because this one made me cry, and it was absolutely amazing. Our heroine is using men for money, and she needs money for her family, and so she meets this duke, and they meet across the ballroom, and they are instantly infatuated with each other. They really, really like each other, but she decides to use him for his money, because she's like, I need money, even though I really like this guy. And so she takes his money, she lies about what she needs it for, and she's about to leave with her family, and he shows up, and he is angry. And so then he's like, fine, you want my money so much, spend a week with me and you'll get my money. The angst and the tension in here, and then we have the most amazing side characters with her family, and literally cried. So emotional. I got so emotionally attached to these characters. I love their romance. Like I said, so much angst and tension. You just need to read this. I know it's like book 3 in the series, but I think I read book 1 and then I skipped to this book, and I just loved it so much. It doesn't even say what it is, but I'm pretty sure it's not the first book in the series, but you can read it as a standalone. Then the next Lorraine Heath is, I think I put these in order of when I read them. The Duchess Hunt, and this one is one of the only new releases of 2021. I really enjoyed all the books that I read this year, but they don't stand up to like the other ones I read. This one is similar to If the Duke Demands, where the heroine is trying to find the hero a wife, and she is actually his secretary assistant, and he's a duke and he needs a wife, and so they mutually pine. Like, if you need a book of mutual pining, this is the book. They both really like each other, but they've never done anything about it. He's a duke, he needs to marry someone wealthy and in high society. She is a secretary, and they both have definite secrets that they're hiding from one another that come out later on, and I really loved everything about this book, and I loved how they were dancing around each other, and he was realizing how much he wanted to care for her and give to her even though she was of lower class. I just love this so much. Then I just have the Scourges of St James series like in total because I read these and was obsessed with them. We have 4 characters who all grew up on the streets together, and they end up, usually all of them have a different social class romance, and I just loved every one of them, so read them. That's all I'm gonna say about them. They are so angsty and have just really good plots to them, and I could not stop reading them, and they are so fast-paced. There's just like so much to love about them, so please go read the series. Then I have the Earl Takes All, which I don't know why I don't own this book, but this one was a Ravished by Romance pick, which is my book club I run with Lacey from Lacey Book Lovers, and this one was what everyone told me to read after My American Duchess because our hero is a twin, and his twin brother dies, and his twin brother had asked him, you need to pretend to be me if something happens to me because my wife is pregnant with I think like her 3rd or 4th child, and she's miscarried every one. We need to make sure she's not emotionally distraught and healthy enough to carry this baby to term, so pretend to be me. So he does, and he's actually been in love with his brother's wife since he met her, and he was her first kiss, and it's so angsty and so amazing, and I love this so much. I love how the romance was dealt with and how the heroine deals with things. I really don't want to spoil anything, but I loved how the plot went. Like, it could have gone in one direction and it didn't, and I appreciated it not being predictable, and there's just so much angst in here, and there's a scene where she's like, but you've always hated me, and it caught me, and I love this book so much. Okay, we have 5 books left, but I have 4 in my stack, so I don't know what I'm missing, but the next one, it's up there. I'm not gonna grab it. It's fine. So the next one I have is Love is a Rogue by Lenore Bell. This one is just so cute, and I listened to the entire audiobook I think in a day. I could not stop reading it. Our heroine is very bookish. She loves reading. She's making her own like dictionary, and so she sees the guy who's like working construction on their estate, and she's very intrigued and drops her glasses on him when she's spying on him, and so he climbs up her window and gives his glasses back to her. She actually inherits a bookshop that's really decrepit and like falling apart, and she hires him to help her rebuild the bookshop, and they fall for each other. He literally builds her a library, like bookshelves for her to show he loves her, and it's a social class difference, and it really affects the hero, especially because his parents had a social class difference romance, and it did not work out well for them, and so they had to deal with that and discuss that while he's dealing with his own romance, and it was just so sweet and so good. I highly recommend this. Thank you, Lisa from Remarkably Lisa, for recommending this to me. Then I have another historical Hellions pick, and that is A Pirate's Pleasure. This was so good. Our heroine is kidnapped by pirates, falls for the pirate that kidnaps her, but she doesn't know she's married by proxy to the pirate's cousin, and so she already has a husband, but can't stop thinking about this pirate that kidnapped her. And it's just so good. There's like so much action and adventure in this book, and it is for sure a pirate romance, and it was just amazing. It was so good. I loved the like the drama in here. It was literally like a soap opera. Like, so much action, so dramatic, and I just could not put it down. If you want an actual pirate romance, you have to read this. Then another 2021 release is The Perks of Loving a Wallflower, which is a sapphic historical romance that was just perfect. I loved the Duke heist last year, and this one is Tommy's story. Tommy really is into Philippa, but Philippa is supposed to marry someone very wealthy, and her mother's really pressuring her to marry someone wealthy for the family, and that Tommy ends up dressing up as a baron and courting Philippa, but tells her pretty much right away who she really is, which I really appreciated, and then they slowly fall for each other, and Tommy is just like so smitten with Philippa, and I really love that. And they talk about Tommy's identity and who Tommy wants to live as, since Tommy's so good at disguises, who Tommy really is, and if Philippa can betray her family and not marry someone wealthy, and the found family aspect is in here again, and I love her siblings so much, because we had the sister in book 1, then Tommy in here, we got to see the sister a lot, she's married to a duke, and then the third book is going to be amazing. It is Graham's story, and they really set it up well at the end of this book, and I just loved this book so much, and I'm excited to read more from Erica Ridley. Then one I forgot to grab is The Princess and the Rogue by Kate Bateman. This one was just so good. Our heroine is a runaway Russian princess, and she ran away because she figured out who was a Russian traitor, and now I think about a year now, she's been in London, and she's working for this older woman whose nephew is someone she met before at a brothel, and their meeting did not go well, but they shared a kiss, and then he decides he has to protect her because someone is after her because they know she's a lost princess, and he is actually trying to find the Russian traitor. She kind of knows who it is, and it's their romance, and it's forced proximity because he has to help protect her, so he takes her to his estate, and it's so good. And I flew through this in a day. I loved it so much, and there's a lot of action and mystery involving this Russian traitor and how they're gonna capture him and if she's gonna be safe or not, and I could not recommend Kate Bateman enough. And the last one I feel like is only on here because I just read it and I can't stop thinking about it, and that is Silver and Sapphires by Shelley Thacker. This one again is so action-packed, and our heroine is born like on the seas, and she's raised on the seas by her parents, but her father is killed, and so she goes to India to live there and be raised there, but she is a princess, and she has to be put in charge of finding these sapphires, and the hero's father stole one of those sapphires, and if you steal one and make them apart, you're cursed. So his family's cursed, and he's freaking out because his brother's really sick, someone died, and he's like, I need to break this curse. So he goes and is trying to get them all back together, and our heroine is put in charge of acting as a slave given to him to steal the sapphire back. Well, things don't go as planned, and she ends up being not captured, but like taken to his ship and spending time on a ship with him. And then they get stranded on an island, and they're trying to get these sapphires together, and he's so angry because he really likes her, and he's angry about it because he can't trust her, and it's so good. He's also very grief-stricken over losing his wife the previous year from his like arch nemesis, who also comes in the picture, and there's so much action at the end, and if you want just an action-packed historical romance, this one is one for you. And those are my top 21 historical romances of 2021. Let me know if you've read any of these and what your thoughts are on them and what your favorite historical romance reads are of the year. I would love to hear. As always, thank you so much for watching, and have a good day. Bye.